Today on Beyond the Lair, where we have a conversation with Chelsee Pettit from Aaniin Retail Incorporated. Chelsee talks about finding herself as a natural-born entrepreneur, commitment, resilience, helping others, and her experience as the $100,000 winner on the Bears Lair Season 2. Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond the Lair. I am your co-host, Geena Jackson-Montgomery. Really pleased to be with you today.
And I'm Dean Montgomery. Nice to see you, Chelsee.
We are so excited today to sit with Chelsee Pettit. She is an amazing individual, and we're going to talk about how we know each other. But I'll give a little bit of background and bio for our audience as to who you are. So Chelsee Pettit is an Anishinaabe member from Aamjiwnaang First Nation and creator of Aaniin Retail Incorporated, a 100% Indigenous-owned department store. Launched as a streetwear brand in 2021, only 3 years ago, Aaniin is on a mission to reclaim the Indigenous economy through fashion and commerce while working as a hub to create opportunities for emerging Indigenous entrepreneurs. Welcome to our programming, Chelsee.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's so nice to have you. Can you maybe tell our audience, number one, you were on the Bears Lair, and we're going to talk about that. But what inspired you to go into entrepreneurism, and maybe give a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, so 3 years ago when I started my streetwear brand Aaniin, I was actually just walking in this, and I basically was just excited to see Indigenous syllabics on somebody's shirt one day. And as I got closer to this person, I realized it was actually just a triangle. But in that moment, I'll never forget how I felt just seeing Indigenous languages on somebody's apparel garment for the first time in downtown Toronto. I just thought that it was a moment that I just appreciated so much as an Indigenous person, an urban native living in the city. And, you know, I was like, wow, somebody thinks our language is so cool that they put it on a shirt. And when I got closer and I realized it wasn't what I thought it was, I was like, why hasn't this been done? Like, this needs to happen. I need to do this. And right away, I kind of had this, like, I always say, like, it's like That's So Raven, where you just stop and you're like, start to zone out. But I really did see, like, the whole, like, layout of the business model. I wanted to be in malls across Canada. I wanted to have other Indigenous entrepreneurs with me. I wanted to have Indigenous workers. And I just saw my brand being like the next like Indigenous Nike kind of thing.
I love that story. So what encouraged you after that to start your brand? And I know that you have a really great success story of starting your business not long after. And I believe it was kind of the end of the pandemic as well. So maybe explain that a little bit because it's so interesting.
Yeah, so the whole interaction happened on a Sunday afternoon, and by that Wednesday, I had an entire dropshipping website up and running with 5 different designs, and we grossed $3,000 in our first week. So right away, I knew that I was onto something, so I shut down the web. I basically decided that my brand was called Aaniin. Our slogan is every conversation starts with Aaniin, and Aaniin is how you say hello in Anishinaabe Moan. So I wanted to be able to carry on that conversation starter. And one way that I did that was I decided to start taking my production in-house, literally in my kitchen. And I started sewing like QR codes into the bottom of all of the apparel. So it was an extra step that really benefited my brand long-term because it's not just another apparel brand. It has a message of starting conversations. The word itself is a way that you start a conversation. And we also have that like QR code that actually passes on the translation, keeps the conversation going. So I just like QR code component, even though, you know, it was me just pulling all-nighters multiple times a week, going to markets all across Toronto, trying to sell my designs. Shortly after that, I basically grossed $15,000 from, I think it was like end of October. I did my very first market in Toronto until Christmas Eve. I was at markets and, you know, I had to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I was sewing garments all night. And then I would go out on weekends and go sell at markets. And I did that every single weekend until Christmas after that last week of October. And after that, I was like, obviously pretty burnt out. My profit margins weren't really factoring in my time. They still don't. But it's like so important that I proved that the business model worked before I, start to invest a lot more time and money and energy into it, I really just, valued my time at nothing. And I just wanted to prove to people, like, if I have a product, if I have a place to sell it, if I'm there, I will make money. And so shortly after that, it was January, I needed to take a break, and I decided to kind of wait for the next opportunity to just kind of come to me, like how I was walking the street and that whole attraction just came to me. I was waiting for that like next step to push me in the right direction. And that was when I created our bestseller, our Based in Tuckarundo collection. And the design pays tribute to how Toronto actually got its name, which comes from the Mohawk, and it means where the trees are standing in the water. So I actually did a recreation of the Toronto skyline with all trees, and then the water reflection actually has the cityscape of the city of Toronto in it. So when I came out with that design, we grossed $15,000 in 1 month. So I didn't have to go around to any markets. I went to 2 of them. I did $5,000 at one market, $5,000 at another, and then $5,000 online. And I was like, I'm quitting my job. Like, I'm going to dive in full time. So that's really how I got started.
That's great. One of the stories that stuck with me while we were shooting the show, and we were shooting, it was live, and it was really funny. But it really, I think, speaks to how someone becomes an entrepreneur. And you said you'd tried taking the academic route, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about that story.
Yes, for sure. So I didn't want to go to school when I was like 17 or 18. My mom was trying to really push me to, find what I want to do. And I just didn't want to go to school. Like, I wasn't good at school. I almost failed high school. I actually graduated because my religion teacher gave me a 50% because I was like health issues. So he was like, you know what, I just want Chelsee to graduate. So let's just give her a 50 and she can graduate. So I was hanging on by like a thread. And then I took a year off to just start working. So I started working at Lens Crafters when I was 18. I took a year off. I was going to do 12X, but then I just decided the first day of school that I was not going to do that. So I dropped out and just started working full time. I was working at Lens Crafters full time. And then I was also working at Sears in the menswear department. So an 18-year-old just working 2 jobs, 60 hours a work week. I was like, this is the best life ever. Like, I'm making money. I'm living at home. I'm really good at sales. I didn't expect to be good at sales just because I was so hard on myself with school and I didn't really have like a good experience with school expectations for myself when I started working. I was just working like 2 minimum wage jobs, but right away I started making a lot of commission and I started realizing like, oh, I'm really good at making more money. Like, this is a really cool trait, I guess. And I started working with they were all these like older women working at Lens Crafters. Like, some of them had kids that I went to school with that were older than I was. And I was just like looking at my numbers all the time, and I would go up to them and be like, hey, did you ever think about selling sunglasses like this? And then they're like, go away, Chelsee. Like, you're not telling me what to do. And I just kind of like kept giving them ideas. And then eventually they started to listen to me. And then they were like, hey, Chelsee, like that sunglass thing, it worked. Like, thanks so much. Like, I made like good commission this week. And so I just kind of like started to really flourish when I got out of school and into the workforce. My mom still wanted me to go to school. So I decided to go to fashion school. I had designed clothes and like sewed clothes my whole life. I taught myself how to sew at a very young age. I used to like cut my dad's fold and make mini skirts out of them when I was like 7. And just like, it's always been a part of my life. I always thought I was going to be like the next Coco Chanel, like all of these different things. And I went to fashion school because I know that I'd be good at it. I didn't want to do it when I had my mental health issues in high school. It was surrounding an eating disorder, and I just had a lot of depression and anxiety. So I just chose fashion because it honestly kind of fed those issues, because back when I was 18, 12 years ago now, there was a lot of like negative body positivity, like stuff like that. Like, it's only the last like decade that's really had a big movement in terms of like self-acceptance, self-love, body positivity. So I really chose that path because I wanted to feed that monster of like my eating disorder. And I knew that that would be a path that would kind of like keep me held down, like in that mindset. So it wasn't like I knew it wasn't a good decision. I didn't want to get better at that time. And that's why I actually dropped out 3 months after starting school. I went to a private fashion academy in Ottawa called the Richard Robinson Academy. I was there for about 3 months before I dropped out. I had no money. I had to pay $300 like a week in school supplies. My line of credit was completely maxed out. My parents made like a little bit too much money to not get OSAP for me. And because it's a private institute, my band didn't fund it. So I basically, like, my parents thought they were like doing the right thing by like sending their kid off to school, but they didn't really know about all of these other financial obstacles. They just thought it was normal for like, you know, go get a line of credit, go to school, this and that. But obviously now, like, looking back, we should have done it very differently. So I basically had like $10,000 of debt right off the bat. I dropped out after 3 months, started going into repayments immediately. And fast forward a few years later, like about a year and a half, when I was 21, I actually had $70,000 of debt because I dropped out of 3 college programs, including the first fashion design program. I had a expensive car because I moved back in. I can afford $500 a month payment. Sounds good. I don't pay rent. And I quickly realized I can't live with my parents anymore. I need to get out of there. So I moved to London, Ontario. But during that whole time, I was still working at Lens Crafters. So that was kind of really my saving grace, was just, you know, like maintaining that like workflow the whole time. I was a very hard worker. And that's kind of why I dropped out of school too, was like, I would have opportunities to go to work. If somebody called in sick, they'd call me because like I was very on it, like reliable. And when people would call in sick, I'd be at school. And when I first started school, I would be like, no, sorry, like I'm at school, I can't do that. And it got to be so bad where I needed money, where I was just like, they'd call me up, hey, do you want to come in? And I'd be like, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And I just missed too much class and ended up dropping out.
So where's the overlap that you have where you said, look, I'm leaving Lens Crafters. I'm gonna become an entrepreneur and start my own business.
So I actually worked at Lens Crafters from when I was like 18 to 22. I got my first store manager job working at a Canadian-owned company called Bon Look. And I was a store manager there for about a year. And in that year, I actually increased their store revenue by 46% in less than 6 months. So I utilized that to get different jobs and just other promotions. So I actually had so many different jobs like in the last 10 years. Before I became an entrepreneur, like I was running a laser eye clinic. I had 26 staff members. I was doing schedules for doctors, doing legal issues, booking people's flights and travel, because surgeons, like, they don't work at one spot. They like have to travel to all the different clinics. So I had like a lot of responsibility at like a young age. Like when I was a LASIK, at like LASIK MD, I was a center director, and it was like a very high stress job. Like it was just not what I was expecting at all. But I just figured the most common theme that I see my path forward is in the optical industry. And that was also one of the programs that I dropped out of. So I had, 6 years of optical experience. Okay, I'm really knowledgeable about glasses, eyes, anatomy of the eyes, everything like that. So that was like kind of like my first level up job, where I was making like $60,000 a year. And it was like, I was able to pay off my debt within like 4 years. So I was debt free by the time I was 25. And my most recent job before I became an entrepreneur was actually digital marketing sales. So during the pandemic, malls all closed. I ended up going back to Bon Look after LASIK MD. I jumped around like a lot, and it was mostly to just cash in the money. So every chance that I saw an opportunity to get paid higher, I would take it. Whereas like my mom behind the scenes was constantly like, you shouldn't do that. Like, they're not going to think that you're loyal. And I'm like, I don't care if they think I'm loyal. I just like need this experience, and like, I'm really good at my job. So I should get paid like what I think I should get paid. And I just really stuck to my guns and was able to make that happen. So, basically I moved to Toronto in December 2020. It was during the second lockdown. So all of the malls were closed. I couldn't work at Bon Look and job in something else. And I've always had an interest in digital marketing. I started my own like little marketing business where I was just helping businesses for free. When I was working my full-time salary job, I just had so much time, and like, I didn't even care if I was getting paid. I was like comfortable getting what I was getting. And I just wanted to help small businesses just kind of like improve their social media, their website, their logos. And I learned a lot when I was doing that as well. So that to me was like kind of paying for school without actually getting paid to go to school, and like also doing something for somebody else at the same time. So I just realized like you can really teach yourself skills without actually needing to go sit in a classroom all day. So yeah.
I think this is a really great example and some advice for youth out there. We do a lot of kids camps. We're actually going to Aamjiwnaang in November. And we teach kids 11 to 18 years old about entrepreneurism. We also teach adults about entrepreneurism, 18 to 40. And I know, and this is straight through, we've done 42 communities now, that there's an encouragement for the education department to get youth to get involved in school immediately. As soon as they get out of, as soon as they graduate, they are put into post-secondary studies. And that is because, I mean, statistically, if youth take a gap year, that turns into another gap year, that turns into getting a relationship, having kids, doing a job, and then school starts again when you're in your 30s or what have you, right? So they're smart because they want to encourage that. But I do think if you're born with an entrepreneur spirit like yourself, I always give advice that if you want to open a coffee shop, go work at a Starbucks. Right. So go get some experience for free that's paid experience. And I know that working at LensCrafters and everything that you've done in respect of management and organization is only fed to the traits that you have. And so it's not seamless going into entrepreneurism, but because you're in such a managerial role at such a young age, reactivity seems to be something that you're comfortable with. And tell us about... We always ask this before we tell people what you do. Tell us why you do it. So why is it that you are doing what you're doing? And what we found with Indigenous entrepreneurs particularly is helping others. So maybe you can tell us your why.
Yeah, I mean, kind of relating back to my whole early childhood to early adult life, I want to create a conglomerate, corporation that has the resources to, take on internships as opposed to directly needing you to be in a school program. I just wish that there was like a smoother path for me to just kind of started a company that actually encouraged that type of like self-learning and self-teaching, where it's like more interest-based as opposed to skill-based. And also because, you can be good at something, but if you don't like it, then why are you doing it? So I just really want to create a lighter and easier path forward for Indigenous youth. And I think that so many of us, we are put into this Western society and, so many of us don't succeed. We're just constantly having to fit into these molds that were placed upon us. And it's not actually making our gifts actually flourish. So I think that there's needed to have an Indigenous conglomerate that has resources, that is for profit, that is able to, make a bigger impact than that we could just do by just donating our money to charity, or if we just keep working with nonprofits. There needs to be I just see it being such a positive thing, because if I didn't work for LensCrafters, which had all of the resources in the world, I would have never received commission, and I would have never seen my own potential of, leveling up myself and not having to like rely on, a grade or like a diploma or something like that. And like, then I went to Von Look, where it was a startup, and they had 7 stores when I first started, and they launched to 35 stores within the 3 years that I was working at. And it was just really unique to see the difference of like a conglomerate corporation and a startup business. Like, there was a lot more heart with like the startup, but the security that I felt working at a conglomerate like Lens Crafters, which is owned by Luxottica, was just astronomical. Like, you have people that you work with that are like well over 65 years old. They work there because they're retired and, they get their pension, but Lens Crafters, they worked there since it opened like 40 years ago. So it's one of those things that like, I want to create that same company, but make it Indigenous.
Do you think that's why you think big? I mean, one of the reasons I think on the Bears Lair, there's so many fantastic businesses and all your friends now and their colleagues. And, but there was one thing that was a little bit unique about yours. And I think it was the scale of what you think on. And how did you come to that?
Thank you. I mean, I think if other people can do it and they have done it, then why can't I? So it's like, they obviously have resources and other opportunities, but I'm pretty good at just like saying that I'm going to do something and then just doing it. And then like, I feel like I've worked in every stage of the business that way. Like, the first stage was basically opening up a department store. It's like, okay, I've opened up 5 stores now. Not all open at the same time, but like, I've had stores, and I knew that I could do it because when I worked at Lens Crafters, I actually helped them move one location to one side of the mall to the other. And I kind of got to see like what that looked like, like packing all of like the frames, organizing all the boxes, making sure that like it wasn't just all thrown in. So then when you bring it over to the other store, you can actually unpack it properly. And like, I don't know, I just really like the team dynamic. Like, when I worked at Lens Crafters, we were always very close in terms of like the staff that I worked with and like my colleagues, even the ones that were like more sales hungry and like super aggressive. Like, we all got along and like we all just accepted each other. And like, I think it's like I think if we had that for our own community, I feel like we would just be able to conquer the world.
That's a great point.
I'm wondering, I love this. And I'm just thinking about your entrepreneur model. So I know you've got your own brand first and foremost, and you could have just went crazy with your own brand.
Yeah.
But what you've decided to do that's really unique and which led to the Bears Lair, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
Why did you feel that it was important to showcase other Indigenous entrepreneurs and bring them with you? What did you see that there was a gap in the market that you could control and that you could really elevate?
So it all leads back to Lens Crafters. Luxottica, they're a conglomerate corporation. They own a monopoly on the eye industry. So they own like Ray-Ban, Oakley, like all of the big glasses brands. And I just kind of like looked at their model and just saw like, okay, well, like if they already have like a monopoly on it, it's like, sure, they're all different brands, but they work under this like hidden umbrella of like, nobody actually knows what they do. But I just think it's kind of genius. Like, people, obviously, they hate it for like competitive reasons and things like that. But I just think like, that's just kind of like where I got that type of mentality from. So I knew that I'm really good at sales. I'm really good at marketing. I'm really good at, creating a story and sharing that story. When I worked at Lens Crafters, all I did was product knowledge. Like, they would send these like brand cards about like, Ralph Lauren glasses and stuff like that. And I swear to God, I was like the only person who actually read the cards. But it worked. Like, whenever people would like pick them up, I'm like, oh, that's the new collection. They were inspired by this like equestrian, like blah, blah, blah. And people would be like, and so I just like always had this like storytelling ability inside of me that nobody told me to do, but it allowed me to be really good in sales. So I actually kind of want to do this thing of like deconstructing like typical business and marketing models, but making it Indigenous, because there's so many like toxic traits in terms of sales and marketing and like, business. But I think that a lot of it can be used for a lot of positivity as long as you have like good intentions behind it. So I really want to start creating like different business terminologies that are more Indigenous focused and Indigenous centered and more about like intention as opposed to what the goal or the outcome is supposed to be with like the KPIs. But yeah, it's like I knew that I had all the skills and I could have run with my own company and, just made $1 million and start running ads and doing all these things. But I wanted to invest in my community. I wanted to create an easier path forward for other Indigenous entrepreneurs. I knew how hard it was to do it myself. And I figure like if you've lived through it yourself and you can make it easier on other people, like why would you not make it easier on other people, So that's just kind of why I opened up my first storefront at Stacked Market in June 2022. That was like a year after I started the business. And I basically brought in 10 other Indigenous businesses. And, people immediately were like, are you sure you want to do that? You're bringing in your competition. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's insane. I do not agree with you. And every single piece of inventory was sold out. We did $18,000 in that first month that we were open, and we sold out of inventory in just 3 weeks. So wow. Right away, I knew that I was right and like I could just keep going with this. And I just kept, focusing on the bigger picture. And it's all of these like steps forward where it's like, first it was streetwear brand. Second, it was focusing on bringing in other businesses. And then it was like thinking about, okay, how can we scale this more long term? So there's like a lot of big vision thinking, but it's also a lot of baby steps that, you're just confirming throughout the way.
I know it's really important when industry is looking for authentic Indigenous goods to buy for corporate gifting or wanting to give an honorarium gift or something that's not just monetary and trying to find it in one place. So I love the department store idea where somebody can go into a mall or into a flagship store, one of your anchored locations that I'm sure you're going to be talking about. We will be talking about to go to that place and wear our authentic goods. Can you talk a little bit to our audience about cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation? Because I feel that sometimes non-Indigenous people and those of other cultures feel awkward or uncomfortable wearing Indigenous goods or something with symbolics or whatever it may have on it. And yes. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there was a very pertinent, Simu Lee from like Dragon's Den. He actually just had an episode air that has been going viral about Asian appropriation because there was this like non-Asian owned business that was selling boba tea. And, they were like putting a twist on it and making it better. He called him out for it on national television and opened up that conversation of what is cultural appropriation. And I think he said it super fantastically. He started asking questions like, well, so who is your representation in pre-production, in boardrooms, in like, your business? Like, do you have any business partners that are like Asian, like that are, like helping you with this model? And they basically like didn't have a single person in Taiwan. But in terms of like having somebody that's profiting from the business, like especially long term, there was like nobody on like in that proximity. And, he was met with a lot of criticism from the other people on that show as well. So I think that was like a really interesting episode. And like cultural appreciation is when you're supporting Indigenous artists, brands, businesses, people, communities directly. So if you are, trying to buy beaded earrings and, you go into a shop and you see that they're like made in China, the odds are is that no Indigenous person is actually profiting from that. It's a quick Google search. Like everything in the world is so accessible now. You can look up anything on your phone. 9 times out of 10, if you just look up the name of the business, you can quickly check to see that they might use words like Indigenous inspired or Indigenous designed, but it's no Indigenous representation beyond those 2 words, which is really disappointing. So that's where it comes into more cultural appropriation. And, there's collaborations where they are Indigenous designed with Indigenous partners or with these bigger companies that have been done right, but then they've also been done really wrong as well. So I think it's just, we're never going to have like a solid, like yes or no answer. And, there's a lot of learning on everybody's part, like Indigenous people working with these bigger brands or corporations versus these corporations working with these Indigenous designers or artists or businesses. I think it's just a headache that we're going to just constantly see rattling around for the next like 10 to 15 years probably. But, hopefully with more and more businesses actually coming up that are Indigenous owned, then, we're going to have a lot more like claim than these big corporations. Because if somebody is at the same level of these other corporations, then people are going to start questioning, well, like, why are you doing this if this person's already doing it, kind of thing, where it's like, there's a really nice quote. I put it on my website because I like it so much. And it's like, inclusion without leadership or power is tokenism. And I just really, really think that quote just kind of like drives it home. Because if you don't have leadership roles, if you don't have power, which is usually like control, then like it's just being tokenized. And those are also like, there's like several different pillars and categories to all of this now, I guess. And it's all very new, right? Like it's very new that Indigenous people are allowed to even own businesses and, start businesses within like the last, half a century. And we're only going to see more and more of these like obstacles and hurdles kind of come up in like the next few years. So my thing that I kind of foresee in the future, because, I just think constantly like 10 miles ahead, is what is going to happen to Indigenous businesses when, we finally make it. Like, what does that exit look like for these companies? And a lot of the times it's unfortunate that you're selling it like to those brands that are like Luxottica and stuff like that. And it's like, that's what I want to avoid. I want to be the option that people are trying to sell their business to. And, I have like financial structures in place that I think that I'll be allowed, like I'll be able to kind of like have it to be a profitable invested business model on my side. But, I want to be that, I've worked on it for 10 years. I'm ready to sell it to an Indigenous conglomerate and, we'll keep it in community.
Yeah, which brings us to a great point, which is, so where are you now? What is your business doing, and where do you want to get to? What are your KPIs? What are your goals?
Yeah, so we've done $1 million in revenue since starting the business in June 2021, which is crazy because just last year on Bears Lair in September, I'd only done like $550,000. So, last year we had like a $480,000 year. I still haven't invested money in ads. I still haven't it's just still bootstrapping and still currently bootstrapping as well. And it's only going to get better. But at the same time, I've spent so much money trying to just do things quickly because I don't have the luxury of taking time to make decisions or even working with people for, their like preferred rates and things like that. So I'm basically like 2 years behind on my taxes because I have it's all about priorities. I'm very good at decision making, and I knew I was making these decisions all this time. And, that was the past 3 years of trying to hit $1 million. I haven't done my taxes. I am still struggling with cash flow. I'm still struggling with getting a business line of credit. Last year at Christmas, I actually opened up a pop-up, and I had, like a Moneris terminal credit check have to come out, Wi-Fi credit check. I had to get a new phone because one of mine was stolen a month before. All of those 3 things were credit hits on my credit profile. And, I was $70,000 in debt when I was 20, paid it all off. And I was been super, super proud that I've been able to rebuild my credit score from like a 200 to a 720. And it's just constant, it's personally attached to my name in Canada. You can't really get away from that, unfortunately. And, there's just so much risk and liability when, if my next goal is to make $1 million in a year, that means I need like a few $100,000 just to keep that going. And that's money that I'm going to have to take on as debt equity myself, because I do want to keep the company 100% Indigenous owned. And I see ways to keep it like community owned in the future. But, these are things that like a lot of people like, there's money out there, just go, just do this, just do that. And then you realize like, oh, the next step is like, you have to sign like a $200,000 line of credit. And if you don't pay that back, if your business defaults, then you have to pay that off until it's paid off. And there's just like no easy way around it. So I'm just trying to like take precautions and things like that. So I actually see a huge restructuring of the business next year. We'll be on a brief hiatus just while we're doing that. I realized that I put in a lot of like time and effort to a lot of the businesses that I work with. And, I want to turn my skill sets into other businesses and start partnering with these people that I work with all the time, but as like, in collaboration and things like that. I want them to have ownership stakes in the positions that we're working on together. So if I have like business development, I want people like consultants to own pieces of the company of the business consulting business. I want to have a marketing business, an events business, the retail business, my clothing business. And then I want to have a category for investments. And then I'm going to create a holding company. And I'll just say it here first. I want to basically, so that way we can feed all of these different business sectors that are working, in cohesiveness together and in synergy with each other. I don't want to own all the small companies inside of it. I want to give these companies to other people who I do work with closely and let them kind of run with it. But then I'll basically like be like the fund manager up at the top. So then that way I can like properly allocate all of the money. Like top of mind, there's a business around the corner, or like there's a building around the corner in downtown Toronto. It's like $10 million. It's like 4 floors, 26,000 square feet. It'd be an amazing event venue space, retail space, office space, co-working space. I just want to buy that and, use it with all of the businesses that are inside of the space. And that's kind of like what I want to focus on next year. And I can't really do that if I'm like, just trying to sell t-shirts.
No,
I'm going to basically, it's like, you got to take a step back to take a jump forward sometimes. And, that's kind of like where I'm at next year. I need to pay off my taxes, finally get that done. And, just reevaluate our whole situation.
Yeah, there's too many times where we as business owners and entrepreneurs spend all of our time working in our business and not on our business. And it's a very mature thing to do at 30 years old, to be able to take that step back and realize, because obviously you've got a great vision ahead of you. Let's talk about we have about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about the Bears Lair and about your experience with the Bears Lair, how you heard about it, what your experience was on the show, and spoiler alert for everybody that's listening, because you were the $100,000 winner, and talk about your journey, because as a judge and as a coach, we watched you grow from a very nervous first audition, and there's many reasons why, and I know you've been really vulnerable and transparent and honest with our audience here, and talk about what you were going through when you came, and as an entrepreneur, we put all poker chips in. We all put all poker chips in at all times, and tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, I'll start with the end first, because I really just want to say it, and if we don't have enough time, I don't want to rush through this part. But honestly, like the $100,000 for season 2 was just so detrimental to the way that I thought about running my business. Like, because I got $100,000 and I knew I was winning in September, and then I got it when the episode aired just a couple months ago. And the whole time it just got me thinking, like, I've been running my business, not making profit, not because I'm just doing so much just because I want other people to succeed. It made me realize how unprofitable my business model was, because if I just threw that $100,000 in when I won last year, it'd be spent within a week. And it really got me thinking about, okay, how can I make this $100,000, last me as long as possible, make it a better investment? And it got me thinking, when I was on the show, I was pitching for a wholesale model, which as soon as I won, I immediately switched to, even though I didn't get the money right away. I just dived in because I'm like, okay, I know it's coming. It's a safety net. And it just allowed me to make riskier decisions with the other businesses, but it also allowed me to build better relationships with the other businesses too. Like I was able to immediately just start purchasing wholesale, and, it was like a lot better because it was the first time that I was actually able to see money in my bank account, even if it was for like a little while. So it really just got me into thinking about, okay, I need to change my business plan as fast as possible. Like when I got home from Vancouver, I basically immediately closed my store because I was like, this store is not profitable. It is breaking even every single month. And the other businesses were like profiting heavily because I was doing a very cheap consignment model that was heavily benefiting them. But I was like, I can't run my business this way. And I don't want them to, have to put in more risk with me. I just need to get rid of this store. So that's what I did. And I did a pop-up at Square One Mall. And just knowing that I had that money in the back of my, in my back pocket in case anything did go completely awry. Like if I went to the mall at Square One, I got all these vendors there and I didn't sell anything, I knew that I had a safety net, which for the first time ever was just a huge relief. And we did like $85,000 in just 1 month, but I was the only employee still. So I worked there for 40 days all alone, commute for the first week of like working at the store. I was commuting for 4 hours a day and then working 10 hours like at the mall. And I got burnt out very, very quickly. So I had to make some adjustments with that. And basically, that was happening. But just knowing that I was like able to make like $85,000 alone at Christmas during the holidays, I was able to pay off all of my debt that I owed to other vendors and also just owed to, other expenses and things that were just like kind of pending and everything. So like, thank you for allowing me to like make that risk right away. Like that was just like a huge help and it just completely changed my mentality. But yeah, I'll talk about like going to Bears Lair. I actually met you guys at Collision Conference earlier that spring, or in that June. And I, for some reason, felt like my business couldn't apply to it. There was like something about, like, I think it was saying that you could win $100,000, but I thought that you couldn't have made $100,000 in a year for some reason. So I was like, oh, damn. So I asked you, you're like, no, apply. So I did. And, I had so many people asking me like, did that show get back to you? This and that. And like, so I think I got the call like beginning of September. I remember like I just started crying. It was so crazy. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, like I got in, like this is so insane. Like, okay, I'm going to Vancouver. How am I going to do this? And at that time I still had my store. We were getting ready for Orange Shirt Day. I was hosting a Truth and Reconciliation Day event at Stack Market, but then we were also hosting our first Indigenous Business Development Day with Shopify at the Shopify headquarters. So, I had to leave September 11th. And then as soon as I came back from filming, I think it was like the 26th. And then I had Truth and Reconciliation Day on the 30th, and then our Indigenous Business Development Day on October 2nd. So, all of these things were just back to back to back. And I was just like freaking out because I was like, wait, now I have to like write a pitch. And I've never done that before. And I just like called, I think it was Colton, and I was like, I can't come. I was like, I can't go. I'm too busy. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I'd rather somebody else be able to take my spot. And I almost didn't go. And Colton was just like, no, like it'll be okay, this and that. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll just make it work. It's all good. And then we had our onboarding call, and, I just got like super cold feet, and they told us like we weren't allowed to use like teleprompters and things like that. So I just got so in my head because I'm not good at school. I'm not good at memorizing anything. I was the worst at doing public speaking talks. I can do stuff like this because it's like conversational and I love doing it all day long. But the second I have to go up and like memorize or like say something specific in the exact way that I want it to come out and, just have that same effect as having a conversation, but knowing that it's rehearsed, I'm really bad at being authentic when I have to repeat things. So I just got super, super nervous, and I called Colton again. And I was like, yeah, I'm not coming. Like, if there's no teleprompter there, like, I don't know how I can do this. I don't have a pitch written. It was like 3 days before I had to go. And he talked me down from that again. And then I got to the airport the day our shirts actually were like stuck at the border and weren't coming until like, I think it was like, they were saying like October 5th or something. And like Orange Shirt Day, you need it September 30th.
Yeah.
So we just started with like a new 3PL at that time. So a 3PL is a third party logistics operator. So they basically allow me to run my business like I'm Amazon. They have all of my products. They have all of like my SKUs, all of our vendor SKUs, all at a fulfillment center in Scarborough. And they were waiting for these orange shirts to get sent out. So at the airport, I'm like calling UPS, calling every single thing that I could possibly think of to try to get it rushed. And I, again, was just like, I can't go. Like, I can't get on the plane. I need to just go home. Like, this is insane. I haven't written my pitch yet. I had 5 new interns working at the store. So I just left them there. Like, they started and I immediately went to Vancouver. And I couldn't tell them why either. So I had like, just like, you know, the craziest, most chaotic time before I needed to go and film. So I was obviously like very stressed out. I was very sleep deprived. And then I've never been to Vancouver, but when I go to, apparently. So I also just didn't sleep at all. Like the whole time I was in Vancouver, I would sleep for like maybe 1 to 3 hours a night. And I just kept waking up. It was like so miserable. But even the day before my first pitch, I got a horrible migraine and I was like so sick to my stomach. And then I called Colton again and I was just like, can you like switch my episode with somebody else's? Like, I cannot come in tomorrow. I am like, I am like dying. And he's like, no, everything is like set in stone. Like, we can't make any modifications. I'm like, okay, sounds good. So I went and, you know, even like the first episode, I was just like, try to go to bed, I think at like 9 o'clock, like just constantly listening to this like recording of like myself talking the pitch over and over. I just listened to it all day, all night. I was just practicing every single chance that I could. I was just listening to myself talk. And like I'd put my headphones on at night, turn on the thing, and all of a sudden 4 hours would go by and I'm still awake. And then I would wake up, rewrite some of the pitch, and then have to try to relearn that. But yeah, the first day of the pitch, I woke up at like, I think 3, went downstairs, and I was like waiting for the bus to come and get me at like 4 a.m. It was just like so mad, like just madness. Like I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and like I just kept thinking like, okay, the business is like not in a good place right now. Like I'm trying so hard. I'm doing all of the things that I possibly can. And, you know, like I need to win this. Like I need to. So it was just kind of was like this overwhelming sense, like there was no turning back. I needed this to be mine. And like, yeah, it was just so, so crazy. But when I said I was shocked in the first episode after winning, I genuinely was. I was like, there's no way. I'm like, I was crying in that episode.
Well, you know, and I think it's really important to know that what we wanted to create with the Bears Lair was a really safe, encouraging, safe space. And where the judges were just like, it's okay, take a breath. Like nobody is experienced at this, including the judges that are there watching you. And it really was seeing the potential opposed to a polished, perfect, rehearsed opportunity. And it was a combination of your business, and it was a combination of your passion, and you can take as many takes as you want. And for our viewers and our listeners, those are 16-hour days. What you see in a 22-minute episode is 16 hours worth of filming. So we take the best parts of what we possibly can. And I know from your first audition to your second audition, which was incredible for the semifinals. Let's talk about that last the last episode where how did you feel? And then talk about shortly about your winning, and then what we'll talk about at the end of this is what entrepreneurs that you support and how do people get a hold of you. So we'll talk about that last episode. And okay, Chelsee, can you tell us, leading up from the first episode to the second episode, your experience on that last episode and what that was like? Because I know that what we like to call co-opetition is we strategically don't put competitive businesses together. So it's a whole group of entrepreneurs, 18 entrepreneurs that you met. And what was that experience of, number one, meeting them, and number two, that last episode?
Yeah, I mean, I knew so many of the businesses that were there, so it was just nice to see friendly faces. But yeah, basically the last episode, I felt so much more confident going into it. And I think just because like I understood the process of the show, when you see like reality TV, it's like always zooming in on like ugly faces, like making like sob crying faces and stuff like that. So it was definitely like, I think I understood like the process of it a lot better and just felt a lot more comfortable with like the judges and everybody else around as well. Like when I went in to go do that pitch, I was just tried to tune out the world. I listened to Taylor Swift, The Man, over and over and over on repeat instead of myself talking. And, I just walked around outside, just trying to distract myself until it was ready to go. And I was like, this is it. Like, you got to do this. And I just went up, put down my phone. I didn't even bring my script with me that time. Just walked out and just did what I did. And it was just like, I genuinely was like so grateful for like the process of like my growth and, just the judges and just the whole experience. Like when I started crying, like it was extremely genuine. Like I didn't know I was going to say that. I just happened to say that part because I did just want to say like, thank you and like acknowledge like the space that you were making on the show as well, because I definitely didn't even expect to get that far in the competition. Like I didn't even write a pitch when I was on the plane over to Vancouver. Like that was just so crazy. And, to just have a platform and an opportunity to just go up and just speak my passion and my vision and get taken seriously without, the diplomas or the good grades or, like the high performing titles and things like that. It was just like a really, it's just like, it's never been done before, So
yeah, we love that picture of the three of us with that big check for $100,000 that you have. We just looked at it the other day.
Yeah.
That's great. So what entrepreneurs are you currently supporting? And then how does our audience support you and get a hold of them and yourself?
Yeah. So we are actually opening up a pop-up at the Eaton Center Black Friday, which is November 29th until December 31st this year. We're bringing in dozens of other Indigenous brands that we don't usually work with, but, we're making the space to do so to actually build out our proof of concept department store. So we have 6,500 square foot space in the center of the Eaton Center. And, it's going to be a massive spectacle. It's the first time ever that there's been an Indigenous department store, especially like at this capacity. We've seen my business's growth and, there's other businesses that are supporting other smaller brands inside of their stores as well in different provinces and things like that. But it's like, this is the first time that this is at this scale. And I'm really hoping we can make some like headway with like some headlines and everything. And, a lot of the businesses like Leslie Hampton, Section 35, Cheekbone Beauty, Mini Teepee, Kokum Scrunchies, like these are businesses that I have worked with for a long time now at this point. And it's like, I've built a lot of these relationships from the ground up and coming out to support me and the other businesses that are coming in. Like, the bigger brands that actually do have the capacity to, do big things with like other non-Indigenous retailers and competitors. They always make space to continue working with us because they know that their namesake also brings a lot of value to the smaller brands that are, more upcoming, and they bring a lot of credibility to all of us in the same room. So, yeah.
I love that.
You can find us on, find us on Instagram and TikTok at Aanin.hello, AANIIN.hello. And you can shop all of the Indigenous brands, including my own houseware brand of apparel, at www.aanin.shop.
Amazing. What a great conversation. We could talk all day because you're just so interesting, and congratulations on being 30 now and having such great vision for everything that you're doing, and providing other entrepreneurs a space to elevate and promote their programming as well, and their services and their products. So thank you so much. It is a pleasure to have the winner of season 2 Bears Lair, Chelsee Pettit, on our show today. So thank you. All the best of luck with your pop-up. I know we're going to be talking about that, and much love to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chelsee.
Thanks for making space.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Lair. Please follow us, download this episode, and follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.